Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Mr. Sydney Brownwood.
Good evening and welcome to the TooFatLardies Oddcast. It's great to be back once again as we record remotely in lockdown or near lockdown via the power of 3 baked bean cans and the entire Lard Island stock of string. And once again, I'm joined by the terrible twosome, the Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid of Lard, Nick Skinner and Richard Clark. Chaps, welcome again to the Oddcast.
Hello, Sid.
Hello, Sydney.
How are you both?
Oh, wonderful, thank you.
Good.
Enjoying the delights of lockdown.
Well, we all are, but that's not getting us down because we've got a lot to discuss after our last show where we talked about the state of the miniature war games hobby, prompted by the question asked by the gang over at Little Wars TV in the US. So thanks very much to all of you who got in touch with us by Twitter, by email, various other messages, including Carrier Pigeon. Our post bag's been bulging with your comments. But before we get into today's big issue, I thought we'd ask, well, what have you been doing on the historical wargaming front, Nick and Richard?
I've been picking up on the debate that followed not just our podcast, but also the other conversations that were had with, on Little Wars TV, etc. Quite a lot of debate was sparked by that, wasn't there, about historical gaming and what was happening with it. Thought that was interesting. So, as you say, not been very long since we last did this. I've been enjoying the Brunswicker painting challenge as well. So if you're following the hashtag on Twitter, Brunswickers, there's some really nice work being produced all over the world from people who are painting their Brunswickers of all scales. I've got my front rank hussars ready, undercoated in black, funnily enough, thinking that would be the quickest way to get them on the table. I thought I'd just spray them black, then do the faces and base them, and that would be it. What have you been doing, Richard?
Well, I've been painting cowboys, mate. I've been painting cowboys, and I've been painting my wagon. Believe it or not, I can sing you a song to go with that if you like. But not that I ever sing. But yeah, I've a nice wagon to go. I'm really looking for bric-a-brac and stuff for littering the street. So I've been buying all sorts of strange stuff, and I've just got some parked horses out of the workshop, which. I put a thing on Twitter, who makes parked horses? And I had several answers, and somebody said, oh, you can get them from the Perrys. And I thought, oh yeah, I know that because I've got some in the workshop. So, so I went and got them. So that's a problem solved. But it's a case of I've got quite a sizable Wild West town, and that's not a euphemism. But the problem I've got with it looks a bit vanilla. You know, there's buildings, but I want more stuff like water troughs and tie rails for the horses and wagons, and there's always boxes in the street in Wild West films, largely for people to get punched and go clattering through them. So I do feel a selection of boxes might be appropriate. But
you should look at some of those Mantic terrain crates. They're expensive and they're slightly overscale, but they've got all that kind of stuff in them, actually, crates and tree stumps and all that kind of thing. Might be worth looking at that. Bricks up on eBay.
Well, I think that's right. You've got to think outside the box, really, because if you just type in Old West terrain, you get stuff that's very specifically Old West. But let's face it, most scattered terrain is multi-purpose, isn't it? So, for example, I bought these vultures from Foundry, which look great, and they're going to look great, hanging around the table in a Wild West game. But really, these could be vultures in any game where vultures are involved.
I always think no game is not improved by a boat or a train.
Or a vulture.
It may be that no historical war game is not improved by a vulture. I mean, that could almost be a poll, couldn't it? You know, yes or no.
With the vulture on it.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. So what about you, Squid?
So more French cavalry, more French infantry, French commanders as well. So we can move on after that because that's not particularly exciting.
Have you been painting them or converting them? Because I know you do.
A lot of conversions. I've run out of figures that I really want to paint, because I've painted them all about several zillion times.
Wow.
So I've got into really converting them. And the problem with converting is that you can take it too far, and sometimes you're just left with a torso. You've got a new head, new arms, you've changed legs on the horse, and you're just thinking to yourself, what am I doing? What am I actually doing? I'm just sort of taking a figure, hacking it to pieces, and making it a Frankenstein's monster. That's been quite interesting, but I'm not really sure that the historical miniature hobby should be going in that direction.
No.
Can I tell you something I've been doing, which has been entertaining, in that very same mould, Sid? I've still been messing around with US Airborne and making some US Airborne engineers and trying to do some guys with bare heads, you know, that haven't got their helmets on there. They've got their bareheaded doing stuff. And in the Warlord box for the US Airborne, you get these guys that have got the Mohican haircut.
Yeah.
That, of course, gives you the only option of having a platoon of Mohican wearing Americans. What I thought was, actually, I'm going to use some green stuff and do some hair on these guys. And do you know what? I really enjoyed becoming a little hairdresser for a day, putting a bit of green stuff on and then sculpting these little haircuts on these little fellas. And I suddenly thought to myself, what am I doing with my life? This is not really what I need to be spending my time on.
Did you have some highlights, maybe? You know, a couple of dips as well.
Thank you, Teasy Weezy, for that insight.
But conversions, I think the point I'm making is that conversions can be like that. They can get you, you know, you can think, oh, I'll just do a little bit of this and a bit of that, and you can add something else, and you can, next thing you know, you've just got the torso left, Sid.
Yeah. Well, thank you for anyone who's still listening to Hairdresser's Tips and basically Scalpel for beginners, because we are going to move from that impromptu workshop session. But I think what we'll actually do today is we will move straight on to the big issue. And one of the issues that has come up time and time again when people have sort of got in touch with us on Twitter or by email is how important it is that we maximise the opportunity of promoting the hobby through the games we put on, through the historical war games that we stage at various locations. Now, obviously, we've got war game shows, we've got war games conventions, but people have also been telling us that they've been running games at local libraries and museums and even a couple at shopping centres. So we thought today we'd ask the question, what makes a good display war game? And what can we do to impact, to maximise the impact and create an impact for a historical war game, which we want to be a display to encourage people to perhaps participate in the hobby. So to that end, we've invited onto the show a gentleman and a good friend of all of ours who's been involved in running a lot of games at war games shows in the UK, winning awards and plaudits, darling, from punters and from hobby magazines alike. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome John Savage to the show. John, welcome to the Oddcast.
Hello, and thank you. Great to be here.
It's a great pleasure to see you on Zoom. I think last time we caught up in person was in a pub in Antwerp.
Yes, happy days. Yes, should be planning our trip already, but it's not going to happen. So there's always next year. So fingers crossed. But yeah, that was good.
Well, before we start, John, the lack of shows in the UK has limited all of our contact with the general public and also other wargaming friends that we've got. But one of the things we've all been really impressed with is that you've been putting that time in lockdown and away from sort of closed doors of war games clubs to good use running games on Zoom. And even recently, I know that you finished your first infamy campaign with a number of other gamers across the UK. So one of the things I think all three of us are really interested in is how did you do that and how did you get on?
We got on really well. So yeah, I started, I think going back first lockdown, and I can't remember where the idea came from, but I thought, well, why don't we try using something like Zoom or whatever, which I'd heard about, had no idea what it was. And then thought, well, actually, and basically managed to put a camera on and with with my iPad and an iPhone, and I got Charlie involved, and we suddenly realised, well, actually, this works really well. So I put a table on, I put the game out, the guys dial in, they can see what's going on the table, as you've talked about before, and we can play a game. And that got us going. So we thought, right, actually, we've been playing a bit of Infamy. We thought that the rules have come out, and there's the campaign system in there. So I thought, well, I'd like to start playing and linking the games through into using the campaign system. And we started playing regularly on pretty much a Wednesday evening. There was four guys playing, a couple of guys from Harrogate, and then Charlie would play, and then we'd get somebody else involved as well. And it just took off, and it's been great, and really enjoyed it. I think, you know, one of the things that a lot of people, I put a post on this on the Facebook group recently, because I think a lot of people have talked about the nitty-gritty of the rules and what's this, but actually nobody's really talked about the campaign system. And it's all one of those things where it's, you know, what is it, half a dozen pages at the back of the rule set, and it's dead easy to overlook. But actually, it's brilliant. And what we did is basically it just allows you to link your games. And all of a sudden, though, once you start doing that on a regular basis, after sort of, you know, 2 or 3 games, we suddenly started finding that these characters were starting to take on a life of their own, and they were, you know, they were starting to do things that you're going, oh yeah, because that character would do that, because, and that's it's bizarre, because that's just the way the dice roll goes, or the cards come out of the act. But you suddenly find that these little you know, inanimate metal figures start to take on a life of their own. And we played through the whole campaign, and we were literally, you know, I think we had. Remember, it was last week we played our last game, and it was because I was saying to the guys, right, you know, we come into, the campaign's organised through a campaigning season. You start in March or whenever, and you run through to sort of end of September, October, when the weather starts getting bad and you can't send the guys out. So, but it gives you a nice mechanism to be able to sort of put your games in that timeline. And we were playing them. It was the 8th game we were playing. And it was, I was saying to the guys, oh, it's nearly the end of the campaign season. Yeah, we're probably going to have one more game. And then for whatever reason, that the game just worked perfectly, and we ended up with this fantastic climax, for want of a better word, where effectively the two heroes on either side ended up facing off against each other, and it was brilliant. So I'd recommend anybody, if you played Infamy, and just go back to that campaign system, have another look at it, start linking your games. It's dead easy. It takes 5 minutes before a game. It takes 5 minutes after a game to work out what's happened. And all of a sudden, it just adds so much more depth to the game and adds to the narrative. Really, really enjoyed it.
I mean, one of the things with campaigns is actually not just starting but finishing. I mean, did you find that actually being online, it almost made it easier to finish the campaign? Because sometimes they just tail off.
Yeah, and I think sometimes they tail off because if you've got to count, you know, the traditional war game campaign where you're moving around a map and you've got resources that you've got to manage, and there's a lot of work that goes in behind it, and then sort of real life gets in the way, and people suddenly can't play or can't turn up. I think in some ways, perversely, actually being in lockdown and playing on Zoom meant that it was actually easier for people, because you don't have to turn up to the club. You know, people go, right, I'm going to play on a Wednesday night, and all they've got to do is dial in. So that made actually life easier. We had a couple of weeks where somebody couldn't play, or we pushed it back a week. But generally, you know, the sort of no-shows because real life got in the way didn't happen. But I think, you know, the great thing about the Infamy campaign is it takes a lot of that traditional hard work. You don't have to get orders in. You're not asking people, right, what are you going to do this week, and what are you doing? Because actually you roll up a scenario. That's the game that you're going to play. The forces can vary from week to week. It doesn't matter. You know, we kept the same characters because that's the key thing. So, you know, then the Centurion, the Roman Centurion Christmas bonus, he might have a completely different force with him this week than he did have last week, but he's still there. And the Britain leader, Lardy Manager, as we called her, you know, she might have a completely different force, but she's still there. So you've got these characters which are sort of your anchor points that are going from week to week. But all the things that normally happen with a traditional war games campaign of, you know, as I said, the resources, etc., and the hard work that an umpire or the players have got to put in behind the game, you don't have to do with the Infamy campaign, because actually it's just a way of linking individual games. We could have played those games individually effectively, and it would have made no difference to the game on the tabletop. But what it did do for me is running it, and more importantly for the players, because we had those characters and those characters were following through, and we had a storyline, we were developing their story, and that made so much more difference, and I think really added to the whole experience for everybody.
That sounds absolutely brilliant. And what sort of tips did you give to people before the campaign started, because you were doing it on Zoom, or was it really that you just didn't do anything different? You just had to move the cameras around the table to show people where the different figures were positioned?
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, yeah, there is an element of the infamy game works really well on Zoom because it's card activated. So when somebody's activated, you're then going to that player and say, right, such and such is activated. What do you want to do? You've got the overall camera so they can see what's going on. Having a smaller camera that you can move around the table and give them a close-up. So one of the things and we sort of developed this organically really as we sort of went on, where the players got very good at saying, oh, can you give me a close-up on that, or what's happening over there, or can I see this, or what's the distance? And they'd ask me the questions and I'd tell them. And that just sort of, but fundamentally, it's just, if you play on Zoom the way we did it, it's just like playing a traditional war game. The only difference is you're not round the table. But with a bit, it takes a little bit longer because obviously there are questions that you were sat around the table, you could work that out for yourself. But generally, in playing something like that, where you've not got masses of terrain, it's relatively easy to see what's going on. And you've got a manageable number of units that you can play with. So no, it plays really, really well. And I'd say the best advice is just try it. And that there's no secret sauce to it really. We sort of bumble into it and think, oh, this works, and we've got a little bit more comfortable with it. It's easy for me actually. I think it's more difficult for the players because I'm there, I'm around the table, I can see everything that's going on. So for me, it's just like playing a normal game. The only difference is that my players aren't around the same table. I think it's slightly more, those guys have reacted really well and been able to develop. But no, it's really good. And I think just try it and you'll be amazed. I think people have said before, Richard said before, it's just like playing a normal tabletop war game. It's great.
John, we don't often have guests on the show, but when we do, we like to find out a bit about them, mate. So we have Nick here with us with his hugely popular quiz, the Lardish Inquisition. So let's just strap you into this comfortable chair and attach these electrodes. Okay, comfortable?
Comfortable.
Yeah. Can you move your head?
No.
Right. Okay. Let's just give this a quick test. Yeah, that seems to be working. Now, Nick.
You're not supposed to like it. Okay, step aside, gentlemen. I have here the instrument of torture that, of course, you were not expecting, John, because nobody expects the Lardish Inquisition. Now, what we're going to do is Sydney's going to stand over there by the dial. He's going to keep pedaling in his lycra. Okay, Sydney, you've got to keep the electricity going. And if John gets any wrong answers, we're going to give him a shock. So, John, keep pedaling. John, I'm going to ask you 20 questions. You have to answer these questions as quickly as you can. And your time will be recorded by the master control switch that Mr. Clark has in his hand. Show us the clock, Richard.
I can't find it. I've lost it. I forgot about the clock. Hold on.
You're going to find a timing device, Richard, that you're going to use to time it, and you're going to count me down in a minute, and I'm going to ask John some questions. John, if you pass on any questions, we will add 5 seconds to your score. Now, the first and only time we ran this out was with Jeremy Short, and Jeremy Short recorded a very, very impressive 1 minute 51.02 seconds.
And are you ready, John?
I'm ready.
Right, good. John, your time starts now. No, it doesn't. I've pressed the wrong button. Hold on.
Fool. We're going to have got a nice easy start for you as well,
Yeah,
John.
here we are. This is it. Your time starts now.
Coffee or tea?
T.
Chain of command or sharp practice?
Sharp practice.
The name of your last wargaming opponent, please.
Charlie Walker.
What period would you love to play but currently don't?
7 Years' War.
Fried or scrambled?
Fried.
What's the top of your wargaming wish list right now?
Pony Wars.
Who did you have a schoolboy crush on, John?
Kelly McGillis.
Ooh, what was the last figure you purchased?
Some cowboys from Artisan.
What paints do you use?
Foundry and Vallejo.
What's your favourite paint colour?
Drab.
Plastic or metal?
Plastic.
What's your favourite battle?
Waterloo.
Who would you rather have dinner with, Richard, Sid or me?
Sydney.
Yes.
Lager or bitter?
Lager.
Attack or defend?
Attack.
What's your favourite non-Lardy rule set?
Dragon Rampant.
Last war game, win or lose?
Probably a loss.
Favourite war game show?
Partisan.
And are you a win at all costs man or would you rather be polite?
Win all costs.
Okay, end of, Rich. Stop the clock.
Right.
Sydney, keep peddling. Do we need to give him a charge or not? Let's see what the timer tells us. How did he do, Rich?
1 minute,
Ooh.
27.61 seconds. Now that
Ooh.
is impressive. You go straight to the top of the leaderboard.
By
Yes,
a
it is.
country
Sydney, you
mile.
can unstrap him now. You'll find the feeling comes back after about 7 hours, John.
Well, John, that is impressive. You're far quicker than Jeremy, who was obviously had imbibed too much of the amber nectar before we asked him many questions last time round. So top of the leaderboard. Well done, Mr. Savage.
Thank you. Delighted.
Right. Well, that's very interesting, but I'm rather bored of this section now. What's next, Sid?
So one of the things we're really interested in is what do you think makes a good game for the public or at a show or convention, participation game, for example, and how do you sort of judge that against the things that you've done to make the Zoom games so enjoyable? Do you think the same sort of characteristics are present in both or need to be present in both?
I think to a certain degree, yes. What makes a good participation get a good public game? I think there are a number of things. I mean, first of all, to me, it's got to look good. Whether that's whether you're doing something at a show or anywhere else, you need something that where somebody walks past, it catches and they go, "Oh, that looks interesting." So you need that. Visually, it's got to look good. And when we first started doing some games, one of the things that we said is, we were going to do a participation game. We were really keen to say we don't just want to go out and do a demo game. Let's get it. There's lots and lots of fantastic demo games at shows, and nothing against those. But we said we want to do a participation game because we want to bring people in and give them an opportunity to do something that they might not have done before. But I think it's maybe fair to say traditionally participation games have maybe been the poor relation of shows of games at shows. So you've got beautiful demonstration games and then participation games might not be quite as good. And one of the things we said is that we want a participation game that looks as good as a demonstration game. And so we want great terrain, we want great figures, all those nice things. We want something that somebody will walk past, and even if they're not necessarily interested in, they might not know what the rule set is, they might not know, but they'll go, "Oh, actually, that's interesting," and they'll stop and have a look. And as soon as they stop and have a look, then that's the point where you can engage with them, and you can get. And again, that leads with the next thing is you want to be able to talk to people. And one of the things again that we were really keen on is to say, right, okay, we want you need enough people organising the game to be able to run the game, but you also need to have a couple of people that can talk to other people. So what we found is probably we have like ideally 5 of us. So if we're running a participation game, you'll have somebody who is running the game. You'll then have a couple of people who will be involved, one on either side, who are there to help and work with the players and help them and give them answer their questions. So And then you've got a couple of people who are floating around, so that, you know, as people come up and go, oh, what's this? You know, it's really difficult to do that if you're playing in the middle of a game and you're running a game, but it's vitally important that you talk to people, because that's the whole point of it. There's no point in just, you know, playing a game and ignoring people around it. That's just bonkers. Why would you do that? It makes no sense at all. And I think, you know, getting that balance right. And one of the things that we did, I think, again, there's when people talk about participation games, they go, it's got to be, you know, a game, it's half an hour, 45 minutes maximum, no more than that. And I understand why they say that, because, you know, people have, you know, they go to the show, they've got lots of things they want to do. They want to go and look at the other games. They want to go and do some shopping. You know, they probably don't necessarily want to be stuck in a game for 2 or 3 hours. But when we first started playing Sharp Practice at the shows, you know, one of the debates we had is, do we try and create some sort of Sharp Practice light and have a game that you can play in 45 minutes? We realized fairly quickly that wasn't going to work. But so we sort of said, actually, what we need to do is and there's a couple of things else we did, which I'll come on to, but one thing I said is, we need to say this is what it is, but actually recognize that people don't need to stay for the whole game. So, you know, when often we talk to people and say, well, do you want to have a go? You know, do you want to have a couple of turns? And one of the things we found is some people will, but and some people go, actually, yeah, I'm sort of quite interested. I've looked at Sharp Practice, I'm intrigued, but I've not played it before. So half an hour, have a couple of turns, see how it plays, and then you can go off and do something else. And actually, we found a lot of people then would stay for 2 hours because they got sucked into the game, which is great. So, but I do think there's an element of it's more difficult to do that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with having a participation game that is a more complex game than traditional half an hour, really simple participation games, if that makes sense.
Okay, John, can I hold on there, because I'm trying to keep up with you, because you've given us loads of good tips. So you're saying, first of all, it's got to look good.
Yeah,
absolutely. Make sure it looks good. And does that, we talk also about Zoom games and participation games. I guess on Zoom that can be a bit different, because you don't want it to be too cluttered on Zoom, because you've got cameras on there. So I'm just trying to understand, you know, so maybe just tell us a bit about that. And the other thing I've got written down is mentors really matter, and having people to help you. And sort of what I got from your last point there was keep it really simple. Yeah, is that so far? I think kind of
yes. I think it's keep it as simple as possible, but don't be afraid of using rules that are, you know, if that are more not traditional participation game rules. So Sharp Practice, for example, Sharp Practice is not an easy game. It's not a simple game. It's not a beer and pretzels game. But you can run quite a successful participation game using Sharp Practice. I think what we found is you might deliberately make the forces slightly smaller. One of the other tricks we found using Sharp Practice, for example, is, you know, we deliberately set the force morale at a much lower level than you would start off. So you wouldn't have a force morale at 10 or 11. You might have a force morale starting at 6 or 7, which actually means that naturally the game is going to come to a conclusion a bit sooner than it would do if you were playing with your mates and you've got a whole evening or a whole afternoon or day to do it.
But at the same time, what you're saying is you're not making the content of the game any simpler. You're using these mechanisms to shorten the length and duration of the game.
Absolutely, and recognise that, you know, the game will take longer, and then give people the opportunity just to dip in and dip out again. So, you know, right, you can take that command. We'll run, you know, play for a couple of turns. If you give me half an hour, even 15 minutes, whatever you want to do. But if you want to dip in, have a couple of turns, and then go off and do what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. So we might find that actually, you know, we tend to, if you were at show, for example, we might run, you know, 3 games, let's say. So we might run a game in the morning, and somebody might dip in and dip out. They might not play the whole game, but actually what we're doing is giving us an opportunity to say, this is how the game plays. These are the key things, and, you know, and if you like that, then you can go and buy the rules and go and start playing it. And what it does do is it gives somebody it's a taster, but you're getting a taste of the what's the analogy I'm looking for? It's like a taster menu, but you've got a smaller element of a meal. You're not having the whole meal, but you're not having something that tastes different. So you're getting a couple of turns playing the full Sharp Practice or Infamy or whatever it is. And you're understanding that, and then you're being able to go away. As I said, we've had people who will quite happily go, I'm enjoying this. We had a couple of guys that used to come to Partisan, and they came along and they say, we want to play. We played last time, really enjoyed it. We're going to be here for the full game, and that's fantastic.
So tell me, sorry to interrupt, but tell me what you're talking about there in terms of the way people are learning. You are presumably not, if you're potentially saying come and play a couple of turns, what you're not doing is standing up and explaining to them how the rules work from the outset before they start. How do you actually introduce some of the concepts of the rules to them? Because you've said quite rightly, Sharp Practice is not a beer and pretzels game. It's not designed to be. It's a game that's designed to make you think. But it's obviously impossible in the time that you've got to stand up and even see how the rules work. How do you introduce the concepts that you are keen to show them by giving them that real Sharp Practice experience, not something that looks a bit like it but tastes different? How do you explain how the rules work to somebody through show and do, or what?
I think there's an element of you need to give people an element of the framework so they can go right, and so it is a case of right. It's you're activating on leaders. Your leaders can do various things. When your leader activates, they can give orders, but you don't need to at that point say these are all the things they can do. Oh, yeah. What you do is give them a very 5 minutes. This is the overall. Very high level. This is how the game works. These are some of the important things you need to know. But this is where actually having the other couple of guys really helps, because actually, as I can give the overview, and then, for example, if Charlie's helping the player, somebody playing the French. When I'm activating and the British player's activating, what Charlie can do is talk to the couple of guys that are playing the French and go, well, these are the options you've got. When this guy activates, he can do this, he can do that, etc., etc. So that's something where having those couple of, when I said right before, you've got somebody who runs the game, that's great, but having a couple of relatively experienced players who can then sit with the participants, and they can then get into that nitty-gritty on a sort of a case-by-case scenario basis, and deal with that in the downtime, so they've got that whole learning experience as well. And then it's a case of, when he's activating, you're giving people options as much as anything else. So your guy's activated, he's a level 2, you can do a couple of things. Well, look, these are a couple of things you might want to think about. You're not saying do this, but you're saying, well, he could do this, or actually what might be a better idea, if he activates those guys over there, they could go across there and do something else. But you're giving them the choice to do it. But there's never an infinite number of possibilities. There tends to be 3 or 4 options that you could take. So you simply, and then once they've played a couple of turns, players are starting to get a flavour for, I see how it hangs together, I see what the options are, and what you're trying to do really is just give them a taste, and you want a situation where they go, I enjoyed that, but I want to do more, and that's where they'll go, actually, I want to pick it up. And one of the things that we found, interestingly, is because, as I said, it's one of the beauties of Sharp Practice and all the Lardy games is the depth in there. But that takes there's a learning curve involved. We've talked about this with Infamy. There's a learning curve involved. But you're giving people enough of a taste to go, oh, I'm interested in trying to do this. And a lot of people actually, much less so now, but we've been doing this 3 or 4 years now. I remember going back when we first started doing it. I talked to quite a few people, especially at Sharp Practice, and they go, I've heard of it, I'm intrigued about it, but I've never quite got my head around it. And what we're able to do is say, well, either because we're talking to them, or it'll come and have a couple of turns, and suddenly playing a couple of turns of the game, they go, the penny's dropped, I get it, right. And then they can then go away. But often they've got the rules, they've just never got it to the tabletop. And,
and this is where, though, John, isn't it? This is where those mentors really help you, because when you've got a mentor on one side who's working with somebody playing the game for the first time, then they can ask the question of the mentor, and the umpire can keep the rest of the game going on.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't actually hold up the game in any way.
Absolutely.
And so it allows them to explore their options, so that when the play shifts back to them again, they're ready to go, because they've had the conversation with the mentor. They've worked out what their plan is. They know what they're going to do. And often I think this is why mentors are so vital in these kind of games, because they allow that to happen. When you see games where they don't have that, is when games tend to stagnate or become very slow paced, because players want to clarify what they can do at the beginning of each turn. So the mentor's hugely helpful at keeping the game evenly paced and keeping the energy going through the game, because energy creates fun mostly.
Absolutely.
And that's really huge.
Yeah. No,
Rich, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was really just gonna say that one of the things that we see an awful lot at shows is exactly what you're saying. People who've thought, oh, that's intriguing. I could be tempted to have a go at that. How do you manage somebody looking at your game and actually then getting to a point where you're in a conversation with them? I mean, you know, a lot of people come along and look, but do you have any mechanism? Do you have? You mentioned having a team of 5 or so people. How do you? What are the buying signals? I guess is what you're saying, and how can you respond to that?
Well, I think if anybody stops and looks at your game, that's a buying signal. You know, you've stopped them in their tracks, and they're giving up some of their time, which is valuable. You know, shows only a finite, and giving it to you just simply by standing there and looking at it. And really, there's no secret to it. It's simply a case of acknowledging them, saying hi, how you doing? You know, and you know, oh, this is the scenario. You know, so we've got French over here. The Britons are trying to do this, or you know, maybe something's just happened. So you can explain to them and just start talking to people. And most people, once you've engaged them and start talking, that's when they might start asking questions. You get into a conversation, but it's just that opening, you know, acknowledging somebody. Hi. Some people don't want to talk, you know, and that's fine. But the worst thing you can do is ignore somebody. So it's acknowledging them, acknowledging that they've given you their time just by stopping and looking at your table and your game. And then start trying to get them into a conversation. As I said, some people don't want to talk, and that's fine. I mean, interestingly, one of the most difficult things we found actually running participation games is getting people to join in the games, which sounds a bit odd. Even at things like Hammerhead, which is all the games of participation. So you sort of expect the people that are coming along wanting to play or recognise, but actually we've often found that, you know, people maybe are a little bit reluctant to commit, or, you know, they've got maybe, you know, they want to go and do some shopping and all the rest of it. But again, one of the things that we've actually found is that, and I'm sure you guys have seen this as well, but actually by having a group of them, often, you know, the first game of the day, we've said, well, let's kick. The 2 mentors have started playing.
Yeah.
Once you start playing, and there's a bit of dialogue and people are talking, there's something going on. And it's amazing then that people start to, something going on over there, and they'll come across. And then that's when you can engage them in conversation. Well, look, you know, would you like to join in? Oh, I'm like, yeah. And you have the conversation about time and all the rest of it. And then they join in. And it's amazing. Once you get 2 or 3 people, game going, 2 or 3 people around it, and you get that. You're right about the energy. And one of the things I'm very conscious of is when I'm running the game is to keep the pace going, and so if you're turning over cards, you know, keep things moving along. Which, as you said, Nick, about having the mentors, then really helps that, because they're not suddenly going, oh shit, what do I do? And you're not then having to come out of the game to explain it. You know, that you've had that conversation with the mentors, and that helps that the whole game, there's an energy there, there's a story developing, and you get that bit of a buzz going on. It's amazing how once you get a game going with a bit of a buzz, you start attracting other people in as well. And maybe that's one of the things that is not quite sure how you do it, but if you can get a buzz around a game, then that's what
I think, John, you described really well how you do it. You do it by keeping the energy up, by engaging with the people that are around the table, by keeping the storyline quickly moving on, and as you know, by doing that, you create people doing things, and that becomes attractive to other people who come and watch what's going on over there. And then next thing you know, you get people who are curious just because there's a crowd around that table, and what's that all about? And they will go over there, and so it becomes a kind of it snowballs, I guess, from that. I mean, Sid, I think there's something you wanted to say on that as well. You had your kind of waving at me just now.
I'm just going to mention that there's an old film director's trick, isn't it? That you start the action in the film at the last possible point that you can before a key sort of plot development. So you don't sort of have the hero waking up and having his cornflakes and getting in his car and driving to the bank. You actually have the heist at the bank from day one. And I think one practical thing that we've done in games is nobody will blame you if you start from a point that people are rolling dice immediately and there's some firing or there's some contact and there's a melee, as early as possible. The worst kind of things that you can do as anyone playing a participation game is be given your troops and then being told, oh, well, start marching them and in about 2 hours you'll get there. So little things like measuring the tables, thinking about when the first contact will be. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're railroading the game, but you want to get people doing things right from the start and making a command decision, rolling some dice, having casualties, and that engages people very quickly. Sorry,
well, because
Rich,
as John says, at the UK shows in particular, you're competing with their time. They want to go shopping. The UK shows in particular, I'm here to go shopping. I want to go and buy stuff. And actually, so if you're going to keep them at your table, you've got to engage them. They've got to want to stay there. And this is what this is all about. I think this is generation of this engagement that goes with that. Rich.
And the other thing that you've got to do, I feel, is you've got to project out as well as in. You can't be focusing on the people who are playing your game. You almost need those mentors that John has talked about and that we've used at shows to focus in on the game. You, as the games master, umpire, call it what you will, are actually a master of ceremonies as well. You need to be explaining to the people who are outside the game but interested and looking inwards at what you're doing. You need to be projecting the game out to them.
No, I agree with you absolutely. It is around that focus that's on what else is going on, isn't it? So what does that mean by doing that? Well, I think what you do is when somebody's activated, you don't say, okay, Jeff, it's your turn. You say, okay, the next card out is whatever the character's name is. Now he's got a bit of a dilemma on his hand because he's got cavalry approaching on his left-hand side, and he's got so you kind of narrate what's going on.
Yeah. So
the player's making his mind up internally, working with his mentor, but you're telling the people around the table what the wider situation is. And then the guy makes his decision about what he's going to do, and then you need to make a lot of noise. You need to talk a lot when you're running these games. As you know, Rich, every time we come away from a show, we've got no voice left, and that's not because we talk all the time, because obviously other people have their go, but we talk a lot, and you need to talk a lot to generate that kind of buy-in, I think. And I think John does that really well in his games as well. I mean, I've seen the crowds around John's games at Partisan, etc. And this is kind of the gold standard that John is using to set these kind of games. So it's good advice we're getting here, chaps.
No, I think your point about narration is really important, and I think it is. It's about you're setting the scene, and again, that's why I like your games work really well because you tend to have named characters. You've got that, so it isn't just it's your go. It's Captain whatever his name is doing this, or Centurion whatever's doing this, and you say, and it gives you the opportunity to talk to that wider audience, and that's one of the things that tends to happen with the Zoom game as well, because people are a little bit more remote, so there's elements of it's such and such, and you are almost describing the situation on the table for people to help them. Oh, so he's going to be, this is it, but he's got cavalry coming over here, whatever, or he's got an ambush point on his flank that he needs to be careful of, whatever, depending on the game. So, but I think that's right. And that's really important. And again, one of the things I tend to try and do is sort of talk about what's happening in the rules as well. So actually, even if you're not playing the game, you sort of you can stand there and understand what's going on and what's important, what's not important, and get a flavour for the way the rules work. And we've really enjoyed, as I said, we started with Sharp Practice and it's gone on to infamy now, but just, it was something that we started playing as, in our little group and thought, this is really good. We sort of wanted to take it out, and I guess I almost got to get a bit evangelical about it, because I'm going, this is a fantastic game. I want to tell everybody why this game is so much fun. And if I can bring that excitement out and go, I'm loving this. This is why you might be interested in it. Then, and people go away going, oh yeah, I enjoyed that. Then it's sort of job done.
Okay, that's interesting. Actually, it just tells you something that if you're going to put on a presentation game, do it with a set of rules that you really care about.
Oh, absolutely.
Be passionate.
Yeah, be passionate.
And again, that's one of the reasons why I said, when we talked about, do we make a Sharp Practice light, or do we, we break, in some ways, we break all the rules of, listen to anybody saying putting on a participation game, the rules got to be really simple. It's got to run in half an hour. We break all those rules because we put on Sharp Practice, which is, as I said, is not, doesn't tick any of those boxes, and it takes a slightly different, and it's harder work, and you probably need more people, and that's where the mentors and things like that, you can't do this on your own, or you can't do it particularly successfully on your own. Yeah. But if you've got the people to do it and the investment and all the rest of it, it really works.
Can I ask you, John? Partisan is, a place where you've won awards for the quality of the games that you're putting on there. Partisan is a show that is really famous for focusing on the aesthetic. You ain't going to win an award there unless your game is looking great. Do you have any sort of funny little rules about not having scatter all over the table, not having cans of beer and fish and chip wrappers? I'm overstating this, obviously, for absurd effect, but, is it a case of constantly tidying it up to making it good?
Yes. And I get the guys I play that they get frustrated with me because I will go round and clear crap off the table. And one of the things that we've done is we've tended to have, our games have been 6x4 tables. We have we get a slightly bigger table there, so you've got room so you can put stuff around it. And again, one of the things that if you go to Partisan, which is, as you say, absolutely gold standard. There's some fantastically huge, great, big games there. Yeah. One of the things we sort of said was, actually, we want a game that is eye-catching but is not a massive game. It's something that you could go, I could play that, or I could play that at home, or I could play it at my club because it's 6x4, and it's small but perfectly formed, if you can use that phrase. And we deliberately said, right, we're not going to. You can make an impression by having a massive table there, thousands of figures, and that makes an impression, and it is brilliant. But equally, I think if you're clever about it, you can make an impression by having a small game that's really nice. And and I've got, I'm very lucky. Gavin is one of the guys that we play with, has made some fantastic terrain for us. He's a very good figure painter as well. I can paint some decent figures, so we can between the group of us, we can put on something that aesthetically looks good. But I've always been, aesthetics have always been one of the real drivers for me for gaming. And if you're going to put a game on it, it's got to look good. Otherwise, but yeah. And I guess other people have different, but that's my view. I want something that I'm going, that looks really good. Steve, you're a man who knows about putting on good-looking games. Sadly, they don't win awards in your case. But you were going to make a point there, Sid?
I was going to say that I think one of the things which always makes an impression with people at a participation game is when people feel they could do it at home. So when people are impressed by the figures, they like the terrain, they enjoy the rules, but what they really want to do is to also have that for themselves, in time. And if it's a manageable size, if it's a sensible table, if it's a game that can be played easily in an hour and 45 minutes, say, that's very, very attractive. I think that everyone loves to see those huge panoramic games, somebody who replicated Omaha Beach or the Battle of St. Albans or whatever it is in infinite detail, and they've spent 5 years doing it. That's always impressive. That's a tribute to them as individuals. But I think it is something that you would think, well, that's quite a big undertaking. Whereas if it's a game which is manageable, as your games have been, and at the right scale, I think that that's perfect for putting on a game. People are engaged because they also want that for themselves. Richard?
I think that's a really good point, and we heard that on the last Oddcast from both of our young commentators who we talked to. They've got to see something when they go to a wargame show or convention that makes them feel they can aspire to it. Maybe they can't create that next week. Maybe they can't, have that on the table next month even. But they've got to believe that what they can see there is something that they can do. And having a smaller game with, say, 30, 40, 50, 60 figures aside, gives them something that they can aspire to, and it's a project that they can see themselves achieving. So I think in terms of making a game attractive to people who might consider picking up the hobby, if you're showing them 50,000 figures at a huge, refight of Austerlitz, they're potentially going to go, wow, that's pretty, but I could never do that. Whereas if you're giving them something like, Christmas bonus, fighting a bunch of hairy Britons in the woods, maybe that's more achievable. Nicholas?
Well, what I would say is I agree with you, but I do think that actually wargame shows need to have the balance of the two.
Yeah,
because I think those big games are spectacles, and that's the kind of thing that shows potentially can excel at. But yeah, the other side of it is you need, if you're going to have participation games, and don't forget there's still this language in the hobby about demonstration versus participation. And personally, I've never really understood, can't a participation game also be a demonstration game? I think, anyway, let's not get too caught up on that.
It is. In fact, I would suggest that most participation games do a better job at demonstrating the hobby than demonstration games, which are a huge misnomer. They should really be called something like display games.
They should really be called get in for free games, because sometimes I think that's what they're used for. And I don't mean that to be unfair to people, but I think this is something that actually in the shows are really good at when it comes to participation games.
Right.
I think in the past, there have been instances where people have used, we'll get a table because we can get in for free. When we get in there, we can bugger off and do our shopping. Yeah. I think shows are now much better at making sure that actually, what's this game going to give to the people that are coming through the doors, and how are you going to demonstrate that there's something there of value? We can all think of games at shows that we've seen where you've walked past it and you've thought, what is the point of that? Why is that here? What's that adding to the hobby? And I think actually the kind of thing that John's helping us to do is sort of get rid of those kind of games, to work those games out of these shows, so that actually what we've got at shows are games that inspire people, that give people the wow. It gives them the wow in terms of, sometimes with the big spectacle games, wow, look at that, Austerlitz being refought on a 30-foot table. It's also the wow, I can do that. Look what I can do over here at this table. And you give them that balance. And that's what I want. I don't want to walk past an empty table with strewn in beer cans and people comatose on the table because they've been drinking red wine all afternoon, just to think of an obvious
point the finger specifically at a certain group we've seen at shows. Well, that's a very interesting and interesting view of the world, Nicholas. You've clearly had a big plate of red meat before we came on the show.
I had a very nice homemade beef pie, as you well know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I didn't cook it for you, that's for sure. It's not the Morecambe and Wise show, mate. But yeah, okay. So high quality presentation. Let's go through this tick list now, John. So we've got high quality presentation. You've got to, people have got to want to look at that game, which is what you're telling us, and go, oh, that's interesting. That's the initial hook. We've got the mentors who are there. Maybe the meeters and greeters as well, or maybe you are doing that. The fact that you're projecting out and talking to those people. You've got all your rubbish off your fish and chip wrappers and the Nick's friendly drunks, turf them off and wheel them under the table on a small drunk trolley that you take with you. You've got your dice, you've got your tape measures, everything provided for them, I presume. That's part and parcel of it. Yeah. Big tick there. And you're prepared to have a chat with people about what's going on. You're not being preachy about the rules. You're not standing up at the outset and giving them a half an hour, 40-minute précis of what the rules are about. You're just giving them a quick 5-minute overview, and then it's straight in. And then when their card is drawn, it's not your go, mate. It's right, here we go. Here's your centurion, right on time. He's now, what do you want to do? He can do this. he can do that, he can do the other. You're giving people tactical choices rather than asking them to have mastered the rules. I'm just going through the notes that I've taken from what you're talking. You're keeping the game moving, you're keeping the excitement going. Part of that is that narrative. You're making sure they're having a good time. You are the master of ceremonies, keeping that narrative flowing, and you're being inclusive.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, Sydney?
Well, do you know, that's such a great list that I think, you know, it's difficult to improve on that. But I think that what we can do as regards that list of things, Rich, is possibly head over to the top of the tip studio where Nick's waiting with the Lard Island glitter ball to run us through that top 10.
What, the whole list, mate? All 10 of them? Not half?
Not half.
Greetings, top tippers. In at 10, we have high quality presentation with What's Going On. At 9, it's those mentors with Giving a Little Help from My Friends. Number 8, keep an attractive table with no bits and pieces. In at 7, a whole lot of tape measures providing everything you need. Shooting up to number 6, we have Stand By Me and a welcoming approach. Straight in at 5, Papa Don't Preach, no lectures, just guidance. At number 4, don't get bogged down, but keep it moving. Now on to the top 3 top tips. At 3, keep them engaged with good times. Up 3 places to number 2, it's project outwards and don't stop talking. And at number 1, be welcoming. Take down those barriers with games without frontiers.
And that's all we have time for on tonight's show. I have been, and still am, Sydney Roundwood, thanks to Nick Fluff Skinner, Dicky Clark, and our guest, John the Kid Savage. Not half.
On tonight's show, Sydney Roundwood was joined by Richard Clark, Nick Skinner, and John Savage.